Hey y'all, Eleanor here. I am out on the Springhouse Trail. I guess we say this all the time, but this is really one of my favorite times of year because the spring ephemerals are starting to come up. So there are all these wildflowers, all our special friends that we only get to see for a couple weeks of the year. So it's a really exciting time. And in particular, I was out on a walk and I noticed all of the Cutleaf Toothwort coming up. So much of it that it was actually a little bit tricky for me to find a spot to sit where I wasn't going to be crushing a bunch of them, but I did manage to find such a spot. And I remembered being out here with a bunch of nature journalers last spring when someone pointed out to me how variable all of the toothwort leaves are. And I remembered that today, and I'm going to try to figure out what's going on. So the very first thing I did was actually just to write down a list of the bird songs I was hearing around me. It's the beginning of migration here. There are all these beautiful songs happening, and it's really nice to have a record, a list of all the species I was hearing so that I can remember on a future day that beautiful spring afternoon I spent with the birds. And then I did start to draw some toothwort leaves, and indeed there was so much variation. There were all sorts of different shapes and sizes. And so to try to get a handle on that, I just wanted to try to draw as many different shapes as I could. So I was looking around me, trying to pick really different looking leaves and get pretty simple sketches of those shapes down in my journal. And I was starting to notice that maybe bigger leaves were a little bit more frilly, a little bit more toothed. So I also got out my ruler to take some measurements on how big the leaves were so I could see if that related to how frilly or how toothed they were. And then once I did that for 4 or 5 leaves, I thought I was starting to get a handle on kind of the different types of leaves. And so I made this little score, a little metric, brought out a marker to make some very simple cartoons of the different types of leaves I was seeing. And I gave them a score, my own personal toothwort score of a 1 to 3, based on how toothed or frilly the leaves were. So maybe I can come back and use these scores again next year. And then I scored the leaves that I had already drawn. I was noticing that maybe the leaves with flowers had very, very frilly leaves, so I wanted to remember that with a quick drawing of a flowering plant. And then finally I wrapped up with just a list of some of my observations, what I thought was going on with these leaves. Do the flowering ones have more toothed leaves? Do the bigger leaves have more toothed leaves? And as always, I am left with more questions than answers, and that's a great thing.